Hi everyone and welcome. This is Ray Poynter, and today we're going to be taking our third webinar in the series Automation, and we're going to be looking at a strategy of technical efficiencies. So the agenda for today, first of all, we're going to just cover a little bit of background and then look at strategy versus tactics, and we're going to learn from the 5th century BC. Then I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what I mean by these technical efficiencies. Moving on from there to the yin-yang of automation with the dose of obliquity. Now, if those are not familiar concepts, they will be by the end of the session. Then I pull that together with a summary, and then Betty Adamu of Research Through Gaming is going to join us for the Q&A session. So a little bit of background. The GRIT report has got a lot of really useful information about automation, so I encourage you to look at that. I am one of the co-producers of the GRIT report, and automation has been the theme that I've been working with. Last year, Lady Murphy and I published a report on automation that is available from the website. More recently, we've published reports on if it can be automated, it should be, and the skills you need to prosper. So there's a lot of background going on, a lot of people very interested in what automation is going to do for them or to them. Story so far. First of all, when we talk about automation, there are 4 benefits that we might achieve: better, faster, cheaper, and scalable. However, we don't always achieve all 4. Sometimes it's better and faster, but it's not cheaper. Sometimes it's cheaper, but it's not better, faster. So there are different things. We can look back in the 1990s at CRM, where in many cases, it wasn't better, faster, cheaper, or scalable. It was actually just a waste of money. So all of these are the benefits we're looking for, but they don't automatically turn up. It's incredibly disruptive. By my estimate, over 1 million people have lost their jobs in the research industry through automation over the last 30, 40 years. Now, most of those will be the people printing questionnaires, the people posting questionnaires, the people who used to punch questionnaires, the people in call centers ringing people up, the people in around the country knocking on doors doing surveys. Around the globe, that's probably about 1 million jobs that are no longer done. However, what's happening now is automation is beginning to have an impact on the white collar section. People who work in the head offices of research agencies, people who do research as their main job. And this picture is rapidly evolving, so we need to keep an eye on it. New skills. There are going to be jobs lost, but there are going to be lots of new jobs. We're going to see more programmers and fewer face-to-face moderators, but we'll see more online moderators. We will see more people doing ethnography as part of their job in the future than we did in the past. So there'll be a lot of changes going on. We need to make sure that we're all learning the right skills so that we can surf into the future. Today, we're going to pick up on what I call the role of technical efficiencies in that process. So let's start with a couple of definitions. Strategy. Strategy is the big overall plan. It's only occasionally changed or updated. So frequently, I hear people saying, oh, we should be all about strategic research. Well, if we were, we would only do a project every 2 or 3 years for most clients, because strategy only needs changing every 3 years, 10 years, 20 years, depending on what the organization is. So if we look at different companies, we can see where strategy came into play. So Dell, the computer company back in the 1990s, hit on a really good, profitable strategy. Previously, people had made to stock. So made to stock is like Ford, when you say you can have any color you like as long as it's black. What we sell is what we stock. The next one is made to order, but that's slow and expensive. And what Dell introduced as a strategy was assembled to order. They used the website so people could design their own computers, and you could pick anything you like provided it was something they had in stock, and they provided a lot of choice that way. So that was the strategy. Southwest Airlines in the United States, low cost and friendly. So that was a quite distinct strategy from no frills, which quite often doesn't treat you very nice. So this was a very distinctive strategy. And that's what we mean by strategy, the big overall picture. Tactics are the tools we use to implement strategy. It's how things are achieved. And tactics are frequently updated and frequently utilized. So if we take the example of Dell, the choice about exactly which hard disk drive screen sizes to use was a tactical issue. The exact level of pricing would be a tactical issue. For Southwest Airlines, the decision about what food to provide in the cabin, the exact prices and the ranges, all of those are tactical issues in terms of how do we implement our strategy of low cost and friendly. So we can go back 2,500 years to Sun Tzu, who was a general and a philosopher, and his book, The Art of Warfare, is still studied in military academies today in the East and the West. It's still studied in business schools, and it's studied in sports centers because it really touched to a lot of key things about how should you win battles. And Sun Tzu didn't have a strategy which led to a particular implementation. He had a strategy for selecting tactics to win battles, because his strategy didn't need to be about how do I expand or reduce the empire. His strategy didn't need to talk about culture. That wasn't his job. His job was winning battles. So he had a strategy for selecting the right tactics for the right battle. And that is what we're going to encourage in this context of a strategy of technical efficiencies. So that's 2,500 years ago. Now let's jump to somebody who is a current figure in the sporting world. So until a few years ago, GB, the United Kingdom, was not very good at cycling. We had never won a Tour de France competition, which is the premier cycling competition in the world. We only occasionally won gold medals, and even that only started a few years back. So there was a big change to bring that about. Dave Brailsford was brought in, and he did all of the sensible things, but he also added this strategy of marginal gains as part of his strategy picture. So the strategy: identify and nurture talent, but everybody was doing that. Holistic approach to road and track. Okay, that was a little bit different as a strategy, because historically the people who ride around the velodrome were seen as being different people who ride on the road, particularly when one was amateur and one was professional. So not groundbreaking strategy, but it moved things forward. Focus on the Tour de France and winning gold medals at the Olympics. And one of the things that's very noticeable is that although Team GB and the UK do very well at the Olympics, they do less well at the World Championships because of that focus. So that was all the elements of the strategy. One extra element: the strategy of aggregation of marginal gains. His view, Dave Brailsford's view, is if you can get a 1% improvement in the choice of wheels, if you can get a 1% improvement in the choice of riding shorts, if you can get a 1% improvement in the diet that you look after for the riders, all of that is going to add up to something that will beat the opposition, because actually the opposition will get all of the big stuff. They will have the same new forms of gears. They will have the same sorts of new rubber available for their tires. You're not going to win by having the best of the big stuff. You've got to have the best of the big stuff in order to have a chance of winning. But you're not going to win just because you've got the best of the big stuff. You've got to then try to find the best of the small stuff, those technical efficiencies, so you move forward. And what has happened since he's done that is that the UK have provided 4 of the last 5 winners of the Tour de France, so Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome, and at the last Olympics in Rio took 6 of the 18 gold medals. The next country was Netherlands with 2. A dramatic difference, not based on this really big strategy of going after a particular type of technology, but saying, no, we will have a 1% improvement in everything we do. looking at the technical efficiencies to take that forward. And this illustration here, we have a saying in England about don't let the tail wag the dog. And on this particular chart, I've got automation as the tail. But actually, when I work with companies in a consultative role, sometimes the tail that is wagging the dog will be HR. Sometimes it will be finance. Sometimes it will be legal. And companies can forget what the business is. So for a Unilever, for a Procter & Gamble, for a Dell, for a Southwest Airlines, the business is delivering product and service. There are lots of things you will use to do that, but none of those should change the purpose of the business. So when we're looking at automation, we want to use automation to help us do the business better. If we're a research agency, we want automation that's going to help us do our job as a research agency better. If we're an end user of research, we want automation to have been involved in the process, but we really don't want it to be visible. There is no need for us to see automation. We should just see better services. We should just see better results. So let's illustrate this technical efficiencies approach in terms of concept testing. Concept testing is one of the most widely adopted techniques. People are testing commercials, they're testing new products, they're testing new ideas, new straplines, all sorts of things. And the traditional approach might be that you're going to go to TNS, I'm showing my age there, more likely Millward Brown. You're going to take a standard test, look at three options, A, B, or C, run a test and launch the winner. And that's fine. Sometimes that will be the right approach. It's a relatively bespoke approach in that there is a facility to add questions and change questions when you talk to the provider of these services. But you could also be automated and cheaper. So instead of having one round of testing, you could have 2 rounds of testing. The testing's automated, so it doesn't have those bespoke elements. Some of the legacy elements aren't there, but you can do 2 rounds of testing. And what we have discovered when we've been doing this is that 2 rounds of testing will often produce an outcome which is very similar to 1 round of bespoke testing. Sometimes better, sometimes not quite as good, but certainly in the same ballpark, and it will be cheaper. Another option is we could go automated and better. This will typically cost about the same amount as the traditional route, but you have 3 iterations. So 2 chances to improve on your first try before you launch it. And what we have found is that this is typically producing a better result, but it's not saving money. So if we come back to our general Sun Tzu and we say, how should we pick automation and how should we use it in concept testing? Well, what type of battle is it? If it's a traditional test, there are some reasons why you want the legacy benefits. It might be because that's what the chief marketing officer believes is going to really work. It might be that you need access to some of those benchmarks that you've got for earlier tests. You need those extra questions. Fine, that's the battle, traditional test. Another time you might want to do 3 waves of automated testing. You're going to spend about the same money, but you hopefully will get a better outcome. Or another time you want to do 2 waves of automated testing, similar quality but cheaper. Or another time, 1 wave automated testing, faster and cheaper. Maybe the competition for this particular concept test is not, are we going to do it with method A, B, or C? It's, are we going to test it or not? So by bringing in something that's faster and cheaper, we can test a higher percentage of ideas. Fewer things will go out untested. Fewer really bad mistakes are going to be made. So it's not one solution. One of them is the traditional way through to just 1 wave of automated testing. We have a range of options, and our strategy is going to be every time to pick the right choice. Now let's have a look at another area, insight communities. So insight communities are the fastest growing and most widely adopted form of new market research. If we look at the GRIT study, year after year, they come out at the top of the list. Only mobile research, which actually, mobile surveys, which isn't really a new method in that most people are just using it as a replacement for the PC, is ahead of it. So massive adoption rates. Nearly every blue chip company is using insight communities, and many other companies too. Now, when it started, it was about customer centricity. Everybody knows they need to talk to their customers. It was about co-creation. We realize that there are more smart people outside our organization than inside. And the reason that it took off so strongly in many companies was that they discovered they could do 3 times as much research with an insight community for the same budget. So most of them didn't spend less on research, but they did do 3 times as much research. Now, all of those depended on automation. Nobody bought initial insight communities because of automation, but the ability for people to write their own surveys, the ability for people to draw their own samples, the ability to join people into the panels, to send out newsletters, and all of these things is absolutely dependent on automation. There is not that large skill level, and there are not enough people in the teams running the insight communities to be able to do it without automation. But automation is not apparent. It's simply something that delivers it. But then we start to get the technical efficiencies. One of the things that we notice is that people are researching things that had not been researched before. I was talking to somebody at an airline, and she was saying they've started researching the baggage handling. It had never occurred to them to research baggage handling before. There wasn't the budget for it. They thought they knew about it. One of the great areas that we're seeing companies take their research into are those areas where they always thought they knew the answer. They didn't need to do research. And now that they have a resource, they can apply the technical efficiency to do it. Linking to big data, one of the best examples I saw of that recently was somebody was looking at an air miles problem. There were a group of people that were not redeeming their air miles. So they simply identified people out of the community, rang them up on the telephone, and had a chat with them. That sort of technical efficiency, the fact that we have stored that information, that we've recorded everything, we have a relationship history with the people in the panels, it facilitates it. Research being done much more quickly, so people doing overnight research. That is a technical efficiency, and sometimes it means that they need to talk to their providers and say, right, what we need to do is this. Do you have something that already solves the problem? Monetization. A growing number of people with insight communities are selling research, or they're using research as a method of bringing in more business. So all of a sudden, the insight team is not just a cost center, it can be a revenue center. And that's a technical efficiency come out of this automation. Additional research suppliers. So one of the things we're seeing more and more of are people with an insight community saying, I want somebody to do ethnography with my people. I want somebody to do implicit association testing. So we look around to say, is there an API? Is there a method of linking these together so we can bring those forward? Each one of those is just adopting a technical efficiency. It's not having a big strategic plan to do monetization. It's not a big strategic plan to do additional research suppliers. It's saying what's available and how can we use it. So stepping back, let's look at the GRIT study. It was published a couple of weeks ago, and this is the section I work on, the automation section. And these are the things that are most being automated. So suppliers are in the lime green, the buyers are in the sort of the dirty grey green, and it's ranked by most to least. So over half of the suppliers and buyers are using automation in the analysis of survey data. Over half are using it for charting and infographics. Over half are using it for analysis of text data. And then it drops back, but it's still fairly prevalent for analysis of social media and sampling. So what we can see is that people are using automation for tasks that are common tasks and that most organizations that have, and they consume time and money. And that makes sense. Why would you automate something which you only do occasionally? Why would you automate something which is done very easily? No, automation belongs on those tasks which you incur frequently, which are unpleasant, which are expensive, which are time consuming, which lead to problems in delivering the flow of research. That is where we need to be doing it. If we look at the bottom of the table, these are the ones where automation is being used least. Then report writing and project design, I think that's because there aren't tools. I think those are perhaps the next two things that are really going to break through in a big way. We'll see a lot more automated report writing. We'll see a lot more automated project design. And then we get the ones that are much further down. Attribution analytics, most companies don't do it. So of course, most companies don't automate it. Analysis of biometric non-conscious data, most companies don't do it. So of course, it's not automated. And down at the bottom, we have an interesting challenge, matching suppliers and buyers and matching contract talent to projects. There are some new services such as Savio from Greenbook, but it's not something that is frequently done at the moment. So for this to expand, the need needs to expand as well as the provision of services. So there are two forces that should determine how you do automation. The first is what automation is available. If you are a CPG or a FMCG company, you're an end user of research, or if you are a research agency, you should not be creating automation. You should be using automation that other people have created. So what is the available automation? And then what are the pressure points in your business? What are the things that are holding you up? Now, the pressure points could be resources, not enough people, not enough space, capacity. We can't handle twice as many projects, 3 times as many. It might be money. We can't afford to employ more people. It might be an opportunity cost. It might be disengagement. At the moment, this task is so horrible that people don't want to do it. They leave. Let's automate it. Let's move that forward. Here's an interesting thought which occurred to us recently working on this project. When things are really useful, we change the name. So when automation is really useful, we don't call it automation anymore. So 1937, Bendix launched the domestic automatic washing machine. And when I was growing up, you had 2 types of washing powder on sale. One was for the twin tubs, which had a spin and a sort of a washing part, and you moved, and a top loading, and you moved it from one to the other. And then you could buy powder for the automatic machine. Now, of course, we just call it a washing machine. CATI was all about automation and computers. Now, although we do much less of it, we just call it telephone interviewing, because we no longer look at the technology. We just look at the process. If you're a stats nerd, you'll be familiar with tools like AID and CHADE, automatic interaction detector, but those have been replaced by decision trees. Most statistical methods that we're really comfortable with, we drop the word automation and they just become the name of the tool. So as one of the things that frequently happens is when I talk to people, they say, oh, the research industry is so slow to implement automation. No, it isn't. It's just that once it works, we don't call it automation. We just give it the name, the function, and so on. So that kind of masks how much is going on all around us. In fact, we're really good at it, and we need to stay being really good at it. So this brings to the yin yang of automation. It is the biggest disruptor in our industry. It is the thing that is most likely to change your job or remove your job or expand the scope of your job. But don't focus on automation. Focus on what you need to do and you will achieve it. So there's this wonderful book. If you've not read it, then I would certainly recommend it, Obliquity. And there are lots of things in life you cannot get by trying to get them. Happiness is the best example. You can't become happy by trying really hard to be happy. And automation is a lot like that. You will not improve the way your company uses automation to achieve its ends if you focus too much on automation. You need to focus on the business. Make sure that the tail is not wagging the dog and choose the right things at the right time to move you forward. So what is this strategy of technical efficiencies? Identify the pressure points in your business. Experiment with solutions. So low risk. The risk when you do a strategy is that you try to work out what is the best system, and you spend a lot of time and money gambling on that. And what's more, there's probably a 90% chance you'll pick the wrong one. It's much better to try lots of different things, discover how they change your practices, focus on the learning, negligible risk, negligible investment, and move forward that way. So don't focus on the big plans. Fit the automation into your business strategy. And I call it Lego, not Big Bang. So Big Bang is where everything changes in one go. Lego is where you have lots of bricks that will build together, and you can build them together into different entities. So you want compatible automation, automation that fits with your other automation, automation that fits with what your clients need, and automation that works with your particular staff and group of people. So in summary, automation's the main disruptive force in market research. I'd be very interested if anybody has a different opinion about that. The best way to address automation is indirectly, not by having an automation strategy, but by having a business strategy and fitting automation to it. Focus on the business, identify solutions, and most of those solutions are going to be based around automation, but not always. Don't think that everything you change will be automation. When you have a new system, then explore what else you can do with it. Because if you bring a system in because it can do A and it's going to make some savings on A, well, if you can do B and C with it, you're going to make really good savings. They're additional savings. So it's a great thing to do. Seize the opportunities. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about automation and having a strategy. Do stuff. So thank you very much, and the report on this topic that I'm co-authoring with Stephen will be out shortly. And with that, I look forward to any questions.
Hi Ray, thank you for a wonderful webinar. We've got some lovely compliments from people on Twitter to say that was great and to thank you for your time. We also have a comment saying that your reference to Taylor Nelson took a couple of listeners back in time. We don't actually have any questions from the audience, Ray, but I do have one. I think the saying, think Lego, not Big Bang, is great when we're thinking about automation. And with that in mind, do you think that's why people tend to talk about agile research a lot when they're talking about automation? It seems like the two are quite synonymous. So maybe it is that Lego approach. What would you say to that, Ray?
I think that good agile is very much the Lego approach. It isn't always. If you don't keep a grip on it, then you get teams going off and saying, oh, we're going to use Meccano to build this, and we're going to use Duplo to build this, we're going to build Lego to build this, and this one we're going to build out of straws, which might be the best solution for each one of them, but you don't end up taking the organization forward because you've got incompatible pieces. So I think that is one of the differences between agile that takes the organization forward and agile that only solves an immediate problem. So yeah, you need to keep coming back to this Lego, this interchangeability of bricks. It's why tools like Python and Ruby are becoming so popular, because they allow that interchangeability at the coding level. So all of that is good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And Ray, you and I probably both know between us hundreds of really great, perhaps smaller companies that are doing quantitative online fieldwork, qualitative fieldwork, who might be interested in automation but sort of don't really know where to start. For those sorts of companies, would you say that perhaps hiring some outside resources and experts or consultants to come in to automate some processes is a good idea, or do you think that needs to come from within, from the start?
I would start with within. I would talk to all of your staff, from the junior intern right the way through to the CEO, and say, what are the pressure points? What would we like to change? Let's not start off with talking about automation, because sometimes it may be a simple decision like, we're going to stop doing that, full stop, which is not an automated solution. It's a straightforward solution. But then you start to identify what is going on, and then you look around to see what is available, try stuff out, and implement, move forward that way. Now, if you're a little bit larger, or if you're stuck, then yes, you might want to bring somebody in who's going to look at your practices, and you're probably talking about somebody who can look at your company as it would be if it made several changes. So if you started doing a bit more of this, and you did this and this and this, then here is how the company would run. So again, it's holistic. It's not just about automation.
Right, and my final question, Ray, we don't have any more from the audience, but my question, which I think probably lots of listeners might have, it can really go one or two ways when maybe you're starting to think about automation. You might think, how can I make my job easier through automation? Or how can I use automation to make the lives of my clients or even participants easier? Do you have a recommendation of where someone would start? And actually, as I've started to ask this question, we've got two questions come through from an
Right.
audience member. So let's answer that first and we'll move on to Peter Chopra's questions.
Um, I think you have to look at where the pain points are, as I said before. So if the main problem is that you're giving research participants some real grief and therefore it's hard to keep them engaged, then you're going to look at what the solutions are. The solutions may or may not be automation. Increasingly, they will use automation for that. So, for example, we would like surveys to be more responsive. Responsive surveys are automation. That is how it is achieved. We don't necessarily call it that. We might call it games or gamification. We might call it adaptive survey scripting, but it's automation. The system is doing something without the human having to intervene. But if the biggest pain point is that you can't produce enough stuff, or you would rather eat your liver than do that analysis again, then that is where you're going to look at the process. So always start with the biggest pain point, see what the solutions are. Frequently, those solutions are going to be automation, but not always.
Okay, Ray, thank you very much. And the second of Peter Chopra's questions is perhaps quite a loaded question. In respect of survey-based research, do you think the industry is automating the past rather than truly disrupting future approaches? What would you say to that, Ray?
I think it is, and I think it should. So most people automate the past because the past is what we do, and the past is where the pain points are. But a small number of people are experimenting with automating the future. And I think we're fairly clear about what the future is in a fuzzy way. The future is that surveys are not going to look like surveys. They're going to be more open-ended. They're going to do things like facial recognition and biometrics. Everybody who takes a survey will get a different experience. The questions will be reactive. So there are probably 200, 300, 400 companies designing systems to do that. At most, one or two of them will be successful, which is why you want the bulk of the industry to be tackling the stuff that's a problem today, automating the past, and why you want 300 or 400 companies tackling the problem that only one or two of them will actually come up with long-term viable solutions. It's unfortunate that most of those other companies won't succeed, but that is the nature of innovation and business.
Right, okay. Thanks, Ray. So we've got a second question from Peter and then one from Sean Sana, sorry, Sean, if I'm not pronouncing your surname quite right there. But the second question from Peter is the industry good at adopting automation now? Is there a case to say that now it is impacting on the front or middle office rather than the back office?
No, I think we are great at implementing automation, and we have been for a long, long time. I think that the US is the best place by and large for implementing. If we look back over the last 40, 50 years, we know that in terms of research spend, 40 to 45% of the global research spend happens in North America. So when North America is good at adopting innovation, then the research industry is good. If we look at the adoption of email, we were much faster adopting email 25, 30 years ago than many other industries. Look at online surveys, enormous pickup and usage of that. Now, approaching 50% of surveys are done via mobile devices. The scripting is really so automated now. There are some great testing systems. Look at all those things like Depressi and Tableau and all the eTabs and all of these reporting software platforms look at the things that, just looking at my page here, Zappy, Dove, Ipsos, SSI, Confirm It, Mesh, L&E Research are all doing, and you will see technology everywhere. So L&E Research, that's quite an interesting one in that they provide viewing facilities. And a few years ago, it looked like viewing facilities and face-to-face focus groups were dead in the water because online was coming along. And what happened was that the face-to-face facilities upped their game. So it's cost effective to do face-to-face research. The services now, they've got a lot of automation, checking that people are getting there, using GPS to help people navigate, good record keeping, great facilities for recording what's going on and things like this. All of that has used elements of automation and we've implemented it, but we often don't call it automation. So I think as an industry, we are good at it, and the work that goes on in the big agencies, the big 5 or 6 in terms of automation, is immense at every level. So at the interviewer level, at the deliverables, but also in the back office.
Right, Ray. Peter is asking if you could just very briefly give examples of the 300 to 400 developers of surveys for the future.
Sure. So conjointly, I think out of Australia, who are looking at an automated version of adaptive conjoint analysis. Any number of the companies, I can't bring their names off the top of my head at the moment, but at the recent IIX, so bidding systems, Hubertus's Predici, using a new type of market in order to be able to produce the results there. Is it IMD, the mobile company out of Australia, that is developing so strongly, and they again were presenting there. When I was in Shanghai recently, I saw 5 or 6 different approaches coming from Chinese companies. It's just an enormous wealth. Not all of them, maybe not most of them, are in the research industry. Many of them are looking simply to find information, so they will be working with marketing companies, they will be working with companies like Salesforce and all of these databases as a method of finding information. So look much more widely. Look at the MAPI project, Mappiness, which is pushing signals out to people to say, where are you, how happy are you, etc. Some of the GPS systems. Quite interesting, however. If we go back 5 years, then I could have told you 10 or 20 companies who were focusing on GPS triggered and implemented surveys, and now probably only 1 or 2, because most of those routes didn't work out. And that's what I mean by the high attrition rate.
Yes, certainly, Ray. I think I've also seen lots of small and larger development houses who are outside of market research, increasingly doing things that are quite new and innovative, or just evolving what might have been quite tired methods before in the research space. So that's certainly very exciting. Sean Sana, sorry again, Sean, if I'm not saying it quite right, is asking what kind of skills or competencies should suppliers look to develop in their staff in order to work effectively with software companies, for example. And he goes on to say that, you know, there tends to be, in some cases, a bit of a disconnect between organizations who are providing perhaps research or survey software, and they're expecting maybe their clients to more think like developers. So, and Ray, of course, you've spoken a lot about skills in the past in research. So what kind of skills do you think that we should be developing in our staff?
One of the missing skills in this process, speaking of somebody who was did a computer science degree in the 1970s when the world was very different, were people called systems analysts. And they've got a very important role in that when you're looking to change a task and automate it, this is where you are creating a system, then you need somebody who can understand the way work is done at the moment and say, and by the time we have changed it and we've brought in this automation, this is how work is going to be done in the future. This is what is going to be possible for you to do. And frequently when we see software people try to come into the research industry, they will add 2 or 3 facilities which are fantastic, but they will fail to put into there the ability to know what question was shown to which respondent in which order, so we can process the data. So they've done something that's been a fantastic experience for the research participant. They've collected stuff that it ought to be incredibly interesting, but actually they've not stored what sequence this was shown in. They've not, so we can't do clean analysis of those outputs. And it's that disconnect between things that we need. So when we have an analysis package, we need to be able to do crosstabs. We need to be able to do subgroups within the data. We need to be able to weight the data. And quite often, if you get developers who are not close enough to the research industry, that is where that gap opens up. However, I would say that for most research companies, do not be involved in the development of new software or new projects. Use stuff that works. Now, if everybody did that, there would be nothing new. But don't worry, there are plenty of brave people who will spend their life on the bleeding edge. And as you know, Betty, there's a lot of frustrations and a lot of surprising mistakes when you deal with developers. Things you didn't know they didn't know.
Yes, very much. But it's just such a fascinating era to be in, because, you know, as you know, Ray, we work quite closely together. Every day I'm learning at least one more new thing, which is great. You know, and I think the more people who are like that in our industry, who can have that maybe patience and perseverance, will benefit lots of other people as well. So Ray, we've got no more questions from the audience, but comments to get once again to say thank you for the answers and a great talk again. And certainly people are picking up on the books on the shelf, Ray. We've got one from Mark Coles there, and 2 that you've authored and co-authored there. So hopefully in the next webinar, our audience will see some other books highlighted.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks, Ray. Back to you for the housekeeping.
Okay, thank you very much, Betty. Thank you for everybody for listening. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to you being with us in September the 7th, and we'll have Stephen Phillips with us for that broadcast too.